Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Commander Clash podcast, where the Commander Clash crew talks all things Commander. And this week, we are talking about creatures that tutor and what we like to tutor up with them. But before we get into that, we got a crew to introduce. Kicking things off with Krim. Good morning, Krim. How you doing today?
Good morning. I'm doing quite all right. Just excited to talk about one of my
you love tutors.
Despise things in Commander. One of them, but yes.
Of the format.
Yes.
Tomer, you're a fan of tutors, right? I've seen you tutor before. I think your War of Invention, at least. That's a tutor.
Oh boy, I have some hot tech for that one actually. So I'm excited to talk about that one at least.
And then, of course, Phil. How you doing today, Phil?
Hey, I play more and more of these now that I see this list.
You're a dirty tutor. Yeah.
If there's a little restriction on the tutor, it doesn't feel as bad, you know?
That's actually true, right? It's kind of funny if you just play like a Diabolic Tutor. It feels like a generic good stuff card, but if your thing is tutoring up what your deck's about, it's a lot easier to justify, like, oh, it's like on theme, it fits the flavor, and it's like incredibly busted. But before we get to our podcast today, we got some sponsors to talk about. Our show today is brought to you by Foil Armor. Do you have problems with your foils curling? Well, Foil Armor is the ultimate solution to flattening your foils. It's a two-way humidity pack that you simply put inside an airtight container with your cards, and Foil Armor will absorb and release some moisture, making your cards completely flat. Put it back in your storage box to keep your cards flat forever. Head over to foilarmor.com and use the code MTGGoldfish to get 15% off. And our show is also brought to you by Card Conduit, the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. If you ever get tired of the hassles of buy listing, you can skip them with Card Conduit. With their curated service, you can send as many cards as you want with a buy list value of $1 or more, and pay just a 5% service fee. And if you want to do some work, you can use the sorted service where you list and sort your cards in advance and pay just a 2% fee. Either way, you're going to get a detailed report with the results in a fast payment once your order is processed. And you can even get another 10% off by heading over to cardconduit.com/MTGGoldfish. Card Conduit, it's the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. So thank you for our sponsors for supporting the show. And now it's time for the comment of the week. So last week's podcast, we talked about cards that we thought should have been on the Game Changer list. And the number one comment from Lazy Dino 59, week one of Richard Bizarre Take Withdrawal really setting in. Yeah, first official podcast with no Richard, and I guess we got to up our bizarre takes, apparently. Not bizarre enough.
I don't know.
For Lazy Dino.
I thought y'all thought me naming Bergie was wild. So
that was,
I think
pretty wild.
Zuza was the one.
A lot of people thought that
How is this? Okay,
I was
whatever.
wrong
That's
on the
last
grade.
podcast. How is Zuza not a power? Okay.
So,
Don't worry, we'll keep the spirit alive.
It doesn't even
Thank
have
you.
bounce lands.
thank you to everyone sending in your comments. Make sure to comment in this episode if you want a chance to be the comment of the week next podcast. So what are we talking about today? We are talking about creatures that tutor. So there's actually quite a few pretty playable creatures that tutor something up. So that's our focus for today. But we're not just talking about creatures that tutor. We're also talking about what we find with them. Why do we play these cards? If we do, what decks do we put them in? What cards are we commonly trying to find, or synergy pieces that we're trying to find with these cards? So these are mostly, I think, some of the most played tutors that are creatures in the Commander format. So we're going to work our way down the list. And let's start, I think, with a brand new card. I think actually the inspiration for this podcast was an Ether Drift card, which is Brightglass Gearhulk. So Brightglass Gearhulk, it's double green and double white for a 4/4 first striking trampoline construct. This says when it enters, you can search your library for up to 2 artifacts, creatures, or enchantment cards with mana value 1 or less. Reveal them, put them in your hand. So essentially, tutor up 2 1-drops. I'm very curious. This card is brand new. We've seen it a couple times on Clash, I think, and it's seemed fine. What do you guys think of this card? Is this a card you're putting in your decks? And if so, what are you trying to find with it? Let's start with Krim, since you love Tutor so much. What do you like, Brightglass, Krim?
Well, first off, thank you so much for being known as the tutor guy.
Yeah, you're
Or
the
Black
tutor
Elf.
guy now. The green
And
player,
also
the
the green
tutor
guy. Yeah.
Richard's gone. I'm the tutor guy. Okay. I believe it or not, I don't hate this card. I think this card is really nuts, though. I think this card is busted. The fact that you get to Gearhulk entering first strike trample and allows you to look through your deck for 2 artifacts, creatures, and or enchantment cards with mana value 1 or less. Removing the restriction off of creature is wild to me.
Great.
At 4 mana here. Like, this card, I have fallen in love with it. In all my commander decks, if I have green and white, yes, even the green, white cost does not hold me back because I'm jamming. What do I want? Do I want Graveyard Hate? I can go get my personal favorite Ghost Vacuum. I can go get Top. I usually love, or Adamantium Bonding Tank, or I guess some weird card called the Ozolith is what it's called in universe, but I don't know what that is. So Adamantium Bonding Tank, aka Ozolith, is something that I just think is really, really interesting as an option to grab with it. And then being able to go and grab like what is it? Reconnaissance or not reconnaissance,
right.
or else
Yeah,
the YouTube comments will yell at me for that. But yeah, like Esper Sentinel, you can get the artifact lands if you're splashing a third color. Like blue, you can get Telepathy. You can go and get Planar Void if you're splashing black. These are all very real cards though.
Telepathy.
And
I think
Soul
Telepathy
Ring
is
probably
actually
just
slept
say-
on.
I think the most common thing is a Soul Ring, by the way. We don't play it,
Yeah.
but it gets a Soul Ring, and I
Not
think
on
it's...
not on
We
Clash.
usually
Not on
get two
Clash.
cards. One of them is probably a Soul Ring. The
I
other
mean,
one is
that's-
probably like a Esper Sentinel because it's also an artifact creature. Like, I don't play it in
Sentinel's
all my...
overhyped. Sentinel's overhyped. That's never
Yeah,
an
but
auto lock.
it is most likely to be in the same deck because it's still a green-white artifact creature. It's a little specific. I don't play it in Omnath, for example, and I don't even put it in my Necrobloom deck, which is the two decks that have the colors. But I play it a lot on Clash. I put it in a couple of decks already, and I always try to keep in mind to have something going with it. If I had a Soul Ring, also Urza Saga is my pick for it. I think
Sure,
you named
yeah.
literally all the other cards was Urza Saga, maybe like a Skull Clamp, whatever the deck needs.
Got to get a tutor to tutor up more tutors.
Yeah.
Find
My
there's a
disclaimer
saga, keep
going-
on tutoring.
My disclaimer
ahead,
going on all of these basically is like I will only run these cards if like I'm not gonna build around these cards, like any of these like creature tutors. I want to have the targets already in there. I'm not gonna like start adding cards to make it good. Like if I don't have any targets for a tutor, I'm not gonna start adding targets for it, is what I mean. And the thing about Brightglass Gearhulk is that it's so open-ended that it's so easy to slot into Selesnya decks and still have like 3 targets for it without building around. Like, I don't know, I'll have a Shadow Spear just in my deck and I can grab it. I have if I'm in a +1/+1 counter deck, I'm going to have Hardened Scales. I'm going to grab it. Esper Sentinel
Haywire Might.
is really good in white. Yeah. If I'm in green, Haywire Might is just so good. And it's usually in my decks already. So the fact that it's so open-ended, like, yeah, you can only get mana value 1 or less, but because it can hit creatures, enchantments, and artifacts, I think it's one of the best creature tutors on a stick they've ever printed.
Oh,
And
definitely.
a 4/4 first strike is good.
It's also one of the
Yeah.
best beaters.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
first strike is fine
It's
body.
good.
Yeah, like
And
4/4
trample.
first strike. That's it's not
If you
a,
get
not a
a-
bad
yeah.
body.
Just if you get a Shadow Spear with it, you already have like this is like a Baneslayer Age, right? It's a first
Yeah.
strike lifelink. Like,
Yeah.
you can't really attack into this.
I think the other interesting part about this card, I think you guys mentioned a lot of like how I would play this, where you can grab the Soul Ring, you can grab Mana Dorks, you can grab any Soul Warden type effect. There's the green ones, there's the white ones. Those are cards we play in a lot of our decks. Esper Sentinel, you can get a Wayfarer's Bauble. Hitting artifacts and enchantments really opens up possibilities. If you're playing high powered, you can grab like Soul Ring and Mana Vault or Mana Crypt, or like just a huge amount of mana to set up a huge
Not Mana
play the
Crypt
next
anymore.
turn. Mana Vault rather. That was probably the best until April maybe.
Ooh, get ready.
The
Buy the
other
stock.
cool
Game
the other
changer alert.
the other cool part about this though is in some decks I think it's really busted, like because you can get 2 cards that synergize together. So if you're playing like an equipment deck, you can get like Sigarda's Aid Colossus Hammer, or a Skull Clamp, replace the Sigarda's Aid. If you're playing like a
yeah.
Hardened Scales deck, you can get Hardened Scales, Walking Ballista. Walking Ballista is another big
Ozolith.
finisher in a lot of decks. You can get Ozolith with Walking Ballista. So I think there's a lot of cool synergies there. You can get Sensei's Divining Top in sack decks. You can get like Viscera Seer, which helps set up some of your synergies. So I think it's
District
actually
mascot,
Dis-
because artifacts are prominent in Commander.
If you're Crim, you can get District Mascot because it's a
Haywire
Corgi.
Might as well.
But yeah, I mean, I think this card, if you can cast it, like Tomer said, I don't think you got to add a bunch of cards to your deck to make this work. But I think if you look at your deck list in your Selesnya, there's a decent chance that you're going to have enough targets just naturally in your deck for Bright Glass, and it's going to be really good when you draw it. Let's move on to our next tutor. And this might be the most iconic creature tutor, Stoneforge Mystic. So 2 mana for a 1/2. When it enters, you tutor equipment into your hand, and then for 2, you can tap it and put the equipment from your hand onto the battlefield. So Stoneforge, iconic in equipment decks. I'm curious, do you guys play this in your equipment decks? And do you ever play it outside of equipment decks? Is this a card that you play with like a small package of 2 or 3 equipment in a like non-equipment deck? Or are you like full on like I'm an equipment deck if I'm playing Stoneforge?
I don't think unless you're playing Cobblade or something like that. Like
You gotta shuffle your deck
Commander-
somehow for your Jace.
yeah. I do not see this ever being played outside of a equipment deck, right? I mean,
Whoa.
yeah, like
What?
I wouldn't, but like those that don't know this card, when it enters, you look through your deck for an equipment, but you could pay 2 mana to tap it, put an equipment from your hand onto the battlefield. I do like it though. I mean, I recently built a Captain America deck, and with it, I think the searches for as of recent have been different. I used to never play Sword of War and Peace, but now that it's Shield of War and Peace, I've been jamming
Oh,
that card
God.
all day long.
It's not
baby.
even. It's not
The
even
way
a
Crim's
shield.
Brain
I don't
works.
care
It's not even
what.
a shield.
Yo, hey. Well, but the thing is, you may think it's not a shield, but Cap doesn't use shields like how you would think. Cap throws this shield, so he's aggressive with it, which makes sense. But then so that's been a new target for me because it's always been just sort of body and mind and things like that, like other all stars. But recently, new cards that I've been looking up with this is War and Peace, but the Ether Spark. I think I did it on Clash, and the Ether Spark is just so good, and currently where we are in Commander and how most people just don't play enough spot removal, the Ether Spark just sits on whatever creature it's equipped to, and it's a lot of work to get rid of outside of just straight up artifact removal, right? So the upside of also the Ether Spark, I'm sold. I think the Ether Spark is a very good card in Commander.
Yep.
So I've been playing Stoneforge actually so I never play equipment decks, but since the Ether Spark released, I think I've put it in 2 or 3 decks. Which
just
we
for
will
Ether Spark?
Okay, so usually I get Skull Clamp, which is I play a lot of Skull Clamp, but then I need 2 targets to justify it, right? Like a rampant growth needs at least 2 basics, and then Ether Spark is like if I play it in general just creature decks, I already have the creatures to put the spark on. So, yeah, I play it with 2 equipments. Just wait till we get an equipment land. Then we get a full package
God.
there without actually playing equipment. Then
You're
it's Card
wild,
Draw,
Phil.
Planeswalker.
You're
That's
wild
living on the
for
edge,
that.
yeah. I would never like that's like the opposite of my mentality with tutors. Like I'm not going to just run like any of these with just 2 targets. That seems like too risky to me. But in my equipment deck, this is the best tutor or one of the best cards in the game. But the one thing that also I think is neglected too is the fact that its secondary ability, its activated ability is also incredibly strong. You pay 2 mana, tap and put an equipment from your hand onto the battlefield, and this gets around like you could do this at instant speed as well. But it's also a huge cost reducer because if you're paying. Yeah, if you're paying 2 mana and your equipment costs more than 2 mana, you're saving mana. You're essentially ramping. So my top choice, obviously, is getting Culture Complete. Modern, I think maybe Modern, maybe Legacy.
It used to be very good in Modern.
It was
yeah.
a time, yeah.
Modern Horizons, they keep coming and it changes very quickly. But like
Cool Bionicle you have there.
yeah, I mean,
Oh my God, it does look
so
like
it's 7 mana. So it's a 7 mana. You don't even need to equip it because it comes with a germ token, and then you immediately start swinging at people with a 5/5 indestructible trample hasty, and that's pretty awesome. On top of the fact that you tutored it up, so you got the card, and then for an initial 2 mana, you got to cast a 7-drop. For 2 mana, essentially. Well, not even cast.
And deck thinned.
You get around counter magic too, mostly too.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
the
at instant speed. Yeah, it's so good.
And then whatever the percentages you've shaved off with deck thinning. Seriously.
Yeah, so deck then, I guess. That's
Point
for all of these.
0.0001%.
Break it down
Oh.
for me, Seth. Break
I
it
got
down
you.
for
Let me
me,
pull up the
Seth.
hypergeometric calculator real quick.
But doesn't this also make
so-
you more mana flooded too? Because then you're taking out a
Perfect.
non-land.
I need
Right?
lands.
Yeah, that's true.
Just cut a land then.
Yeah, I could
I'm-
land.
Oh, God, no. Please.
What Tomer's saying is, I agree with. Like, the ramp mode is really big. If you're putting something that's expensive into play, Argentum Armor, Cauldron Complete, these expensive equipments, getting around counters is nice. But I'm actually kind of in the Phil camp where I'll play this if there's just like one or two equipment that I really want. If I'm like a Sunforger deck or I'm a Helm of the Host deck, like I'm more than willing to be like, I really need Helm of the Host. I'll play my Stoneforge if I already draw my Helm of the Host while my deck's already doing its thing, so cool. And then, yeah, Stoneforge sucks, but whatever. And if I haven't drawn my Helm of the Host, it's more copies of Helm of the Host. So I'm actually pretty willing to play it with, like, one target's a little greedy, but I'll play, like, a Swiftfoot Boots and a Helm of the Host, or maybe
yeah.
I like Shadowsphere a lot, too, just because I like that in most of my decks for life gain. But my bar for actually playing Stoneforge is not super high. If I have, like, 2 or 3 equipment, or even just 2 that I really, really want, I think it's worth it in the deck because it's only 2 mana, and then you can blink it, and it's such a good card.
It's also a card that I did put in my deck because I had like 2 targets, and then I played a creature deck with like small creatures. A Lion Sash, the thing that's like a
Yeah, that card is so sweet.
a ooze. That's like
Mhm.
super clean, like graveyard hate.
Yeah.
And just the thing you can tutor up. And it's not too bad if you play like all these Spirited Companions. It's not bad to draw this one.
Oh,
Also, sorry,
these
Richard,
are-
Dowsing Dagger. We should
yeah, I was
probably
gonna say
this.
we got to set that for Richard, yeah. Get those plant
With
tokens.
the amount of veggies we need in Commander now, right, with Graveyard Hate and whatnot, like I would play some of these cards just generically, like the Lion Sash you had mentioned, or yeah, I guess for some Dowsing Dagger, but that's not a veggie. I will say the Ether Spark is good enough to be a veggie. Shadow Spear, being able to shut off your opponents getting indestructible. These are cards I was just generically playing. I'm in the camp of Tomer where if I don't have to alter my deck, I will play it. Or I wouldn't alter my deck because I would play these cards normally. So maybe it is worth just playing Stoneforge generically now.
What's your
so
minimum
because-
number of targets for it?
That's
though? In
that's
general.
where that's what I'm wondering in
Dose.
my head because that's the
2.
hard part, right? See,
Yeah,
you
Phil
two-
and Seth are
y'all are
ridiculous.
saying 2 and you're all wild. Y'all
Yeah.
wild for that one.
I think I'm like
okay, I got a list
5.
open here from
Oh,
a
4, maybe
future
4.
Commander Clash. It is Stoneforge, and then Ether Spark,
Okay.
Shadow Spear.
Wow.
So you just have 2. You're
just
wild,
have 2.
man.
Wow.
I think I want at least no less.
I even
Then
have
4.
overlapping here. I played Brightglass
I
Gearhulk
want
as well,
4.
and Shadow Spear, and also Urza Saga.
Wait,
so
then you
the
have-
deck only.
see-
I play my deck once. Okay, I don't need to tutor twice if I don't play it. Right?
I came very close to playing it with 0 targets in my Plagan deck because I added that higher toughness than power, and then I
just-
built the whole
I mean, you
deck
had
and did
0
funny
targets.
equipment.
Sick
in it.
shuffle effect.
Yeah, I caught it right at the very last second. All right, let's move on to a whole cycle, I guess, of creatures. This is the Trinket Mage cycle. So there are now, I believe, 5 of these. Trinket Mage,
Yes.
it's a 3-mana 2/2 that can get an artifact that's mana value is 0 or 1. Tribute Mage gets a artifact that's mana value 2. Trophy Mage, mana value 3, Transit Mage, 4 or 5, and then Treasure Mage, mana value 6 or higher artifact. So basically, if you want to get artifacts, these cards will get the job done. I would say that Trinket and Treasure are probably the 2 that I have played the most and seen played the most.
Mhm.
Trinket Mage has the upside that there's a lot of powerful, cheap artifacts that you can get. We've already been talking about Shadow Spheres and Skull Clamps and Soul Rings. And then Treasure Mage, if you're playing big artifacts, you get a huge amount of variety, right? You can get a Portal to Phyrexian, you can get a Worm Coil Engine, you get a Mere Battle Sphere. There's a
Right.
lot of options there. The ones in the middle, those ones I need a very specific reason to play. Sometimes I play Trophy Mage to like get a sword or something, but those ones I don't play as much. But I'm curious, what do you guys play, or which of these do you guys play, and what are you finding with them?
I think I don't play Treasure Mage, which is funny because I think y'all love, like a lot of people love Treasure Mage,
Treasure
but
Mage is decent.
never play it. I have no
Okay.
artifact finishers. Maybe I can go get Shamil and like like, the Phyrexian portal, but I don't even play those that much.
Yeah.
I do have a deep love, though, for Trinket Mage and Trophy Mage. Those are my favorites, and those have always been my favorites, and they've only gotten better. Ghost Vacuum, again, I cannot stress this enough, has been a staple in almost every deck I've played. And I am now just looking for it. All times, I've never found it to be irrelevant. I love being able to get top, Adamantium Bonding Tank, things like that. Soul Ring, of course. But now, if I'm in an artifact deck, I know I'm up to some artifact shenanigans, and usually my artifact decks are not like combo decks. They're meant to be aggro, so I love my Trophy Mages because I'm able to go get Simulacrum Synthesizer. That card is just my favorite thing. I will always go dig for that. And if I guess I'm an artifact equipment or something like that, then we can start talking about Sword of Body and Mind and things like that, yada, 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 the swords you had mentioned, or shields in some cases. But the new one is the Transit Mage, right? We haven't actually, that one was from Ether Drift.
Yep.
And I've actually kind of been tinkering around with it in my my artifact aggro deck. And really, it's just there to go grab the One Ring. Right? Like, it's, the One Ring is nice, but it gets a 4 or a 5. So that is nice. And one of the cool things with Synthesizer is that it's on ETB. So if you go grab like Conjurer's Closet, or something like you can blink a big artifact, get your constructs going. Alhammer's Archive is something that I would like think about just because, oh, cute, I get to draw more, gain more life, things like that if it matters to me. Because these are artifacts that I used to play with all the time, but maybe Transit Mage is worth looking at because as I looked at it, we have Wedding Rings, One Rings, lots of good things around 4 and 5 that I think are pretty strong, and maybe Transit Mage has legs, but I would never play.
Seen the Transit Mage yet, but if we like 4 and 5, if you're in monocolor, you kind of play the ring in every deck, right? Try not to, but
Ether Spark,
and then
so you got Ring,
Ether
Spark,
Solemn,
but
Roaming Throne, Panharmonicon.
Roaming Throne,
Throne of Eldraine is
the Throne of Eldraine.
Yeah.
Shouldn't you just play Transit Mage just how I play the Stoneforge then? I guess 3 mana 2/2 is way different than a 2 mana anything. But
it also puts it in a play.
So Machine God's Effigy. That's an everyday,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So
it also
Transit Mage is kind of
super nice.
Really good.
Yeah,
we haven't seen it yet,
3 mana, and then you get a 4, so you played the next turn, so it's like it lines up perfectly.
I'm the party pooper here. I don't like these cards.
You don't play any?
What?
I played them a lot, and then I've been just cutting them more and more. My favorite one is Trinket Mage, though. But I just find like 3 mana sorcery speed tutors. That's a lot of mana for my tutors these days, especially when they're narrow, like the Trinket Mages. Like,
sure.
Do I want to run this over like a Fabricate, which is the same mana cost, but it gets any artifact without a mana restriction? Like, sure, the 2/2 body is good. If I have blink effects, then it's better. If it's like a wizard deck, it gets better. Like, obviously, synergies make it better, but in a vacuum, I don't really value the 2/2 body that much. I would much rather
But
like
what about
Word
in a
of
ghost
Invention.
vacuum?
Yeah.
Oh,
A Trinket Mage is the one I play the most. And I've started adding it to some of my Izzet decks because I'm a very big Cleansing Fire believer. And guess what?
To get your
Trinket
artifact
Mage
land.
can get your artifact land, baby. Your Silver Bluff Bridge. I get it. And then you Cleansing Wildfire it. And you're raping.
I feel like you're getting to the O'Hare Axelon stage of your Izzet Ramp adventure where you're like,
good, though.
I play a Trinket Mage to get an artifact land, so I draw my Cleansing Wildfire. And then
artifact land.
And then
I have
Rampant
4
Growth.
targets. If I have 4 targets, then I'm in Izzet, so I'm running the Cleansing Wildfire package. Then I'm more interested in running the Trinket Mage. But overall, like, this is going to be my general vibe with all these.
Yeah.
If it's like 3 mana sorcery speed, put it into my hand, not the battlefield. Not very interested. Brightglass is 4 mana, you get 2. And you put them on the battlefield. So that's like insane value. Stoneforge is 2 mana. Put it in your hand. I already like that. But then you could also mana discount. But like 3 mana, sorcery speed, put it to your hand with restrictions. I don't know.
The only thing I'd say against that is equipment or artifacts. And if you're playing an equipment deck, then you kind of want bodies. So maybe that makes them a little bit better. Like if you need the body to put the artifact you're tutoring up onto, then it goes up in value a little bit. But I think it is a fair point that 3 mana for a Nero tutor is a little bit on the high end at sorcery speed.
They're wizards.
Although all of these mages don't feel that narrow when they're like if you see somebody playing these cards, they never feel narrow.
They're just
right?
kind of
Like,
slow. That's my
I play
problem. It's
one
like
in
3 mana, you put a 2/2 on the battlefield. Am I happy with that turn? Not really.
So I play Trophy Mage in Lonis very narrowly because it only now it got a new piece, but before we got the thing that makes top dust whenever artifact tokens enter, that's also a 3-drop, but usually it got
the retro foundry thing, or retrofitter foundry, I think.
Yep.
No,
Is that what you're talking about?
I don't know. It's a 3-drop that makes top dust and it. But
Yeah. Whenever you make an artifact token, you make a Thopter.
that's good in
Yeah,
Lonis, and I guess that's a backup target. But Academy Manufacturer and Inspiring Statuary
Sure.
win me the game if I untap with them. So I
you probably
gladly
run all
pay
of
a
them.
3-drop that also makes me a clue.
Yeah,
that
because
next turn or
But
in
you
this
have a lot
turn
of
I
targets.
cast
it's
it.
a creature.
That's not narrow.
It's
Yeah.
two.
That's a
It's
lot of
now it's
targets.
3 targets, but I would play it with 1 target because Manufacturer is so busted in Lonis that
It's so worth it.
That's where
I
the
either
synergy
have it in
pays
my
off.
hands or I get it, and then
And it's better
very
than
narrow, but
Fabricate
it's-
in Lonis because you actually care about the creature aspect of it, right?
yeah. It's a little bit extra synergy.
The more I think about the new one, Transit Mage, the more I actually kind of like it. You also got like Biden of Thassa, you got Hedron Archive,
Okay,
Tomer, some Hedron Archive, Helmet
Trying to win
of
Tomer with that.
Flux
Was this
Reservoir.
2011?
Like, there's actually like a lot of things that you can get for 4 mana with that. But yeah, interesting.
Panamonicon.
Do you think they're done now? They got to be done now, right? We've
They are. It's
completed
cycle's
the
over.
entire. Yeah, we've completed the entire thing. It took 20 years. Well, let's move on. Speaking of tutors that can find big things, we have, I guess, Treasure Mage, but for creatures in Fierce Empath. So Fierce Empath is a 3-drop green creature. When it enters, you can search your library for a creature with mana value 6 or greater, reveal it, put it in your hand, and then shuffle. I'm also curious if you guys play this one. I know this card has uses, and I've seen people play it a lot. I'm honestly not sure I've ever put this in one of my commander decks, or not in a very long time at least. Maybe I did a long time ago. Is this card actually worth running? It snags Crater Hoofs and, I don't know, Titans and all kinds of big things. Do you guys play this card? How good is it? And what do you find?
I mean,
I put it in Elf Ball.
Oh yeah, well, Elf Ball. That
yeah.
Like,
Elf
to get
Ball
the
gets
hoof with
one
elves.
thing.
That
I
actually
need
makes-
heavy
or-
synergies. Like if
that
it's
actually
like
makes a lot of
super
sense.
creature heavy, and you care about creature synergies so much, like Elf Ball, then I will run it because then it like tutors up your finisher or whatever good top end your creature deck has. But outside of that, I'm like, meh.
I
played
recently
in-
dropped this from my list.
Yeah, I can't.
it-
It is a little narrow. It's I don't know. So I played in Lonis because I have, first of all, Disciple of Freylis made it so now you can get your land drop with this. So I think now it's a little bit more generically better. But in Lonis, I play all these improvise or affinity for artifact stuff, so I can get a thought monitor, cast it for 1. So I'm not
Ooh,
stuck
okay.
with only tutoring clunky stuff with it. Do you think do you think they make this a cycle? Like, whatever creature can search up another creature, especially a 3-drop, and they can get more of them. Well, that's a squad
Ooh.
talk. Actually, if a 2-drop is probably the better one. But that would be a cool cycle. Also, there's a cool old border version of this that is not too expensive, so that's a good reason to play it as well.
I mean, I just recently took this out of my Black Panther deck because Black Panther allowed me to go grab Lumra, and I think when my whole game plan was to ramp with it and also get like lots and lots of lands back. Lumra's a really good target for that. And on top of that, if you really want to channel your entertainment, you can go get like Apex Devastator just for cascade nonsense. But
Man of
the one thing
Gotcha.
I really liked about Fierce Empath is it allowed me to get Lumra. It allowed me to get the Baloth with landfall. You get a 4/4 every time. Ancient Green Warden, the one that allows you to play lands from your graveyard, doubles
Yep.
land ETBs, things like that. So there was a lot of good targets because it hits the threshold of 6 or greater, which is kind of what I wanted. But then I realized that I don't know if I really like Fierce Empath at all. Like, I'll just play those cards, and with enough redundancy of those type of effects, I'll just get them because I don't know. I don't like tutors. It has to be really cool or be able to get something very specific that I really want to play with. But in Black Panther, my whole game plan is just do land stuff. I'm never really hurting to cast 6-drops because I've ramped 100 times. So I just ended up dropping it. Like, I don't think I
find a land
need
with
it
it
anymore.
now. With Disciple of Freyalise made me
Ooh.
lock this in forever.
Oh,
Oh,
that
yeah,
actually
that's cool tech.
That
the
is
last
interesting.
times
is a
I cast
good
it, I
point.
actually got the Disciple, so it
That might
seems
actually make me
probably like the
play
best thing.
this. That's I know Karn the Great Creator. You see that in Modern sometimes, where because Karn's
Yeah.
tutoring from your sideboard, people play like one land in their sideboard to get
Oh,
with
yeah.
Karn. Being able to get Disciple of Freyalise, I was gonna say in my green decks, the problem I have with this is I'd rather just play another Rishkar's Expertise or Return to the Wild, like some other card draw effect, rather than trying to tutor up one thing. I'd rather have that slot go to something that's going to just like refill my hand and draw a bunch of cards, or just another finisher, rather than playing a 5-mana or a 3-mana tax to get like one finisher. But having the option to get Disciple of Freyalise might make me reconsider it. Like the tech of tutoring up a land might be enough to make me put it back in some decks.
I think in Elf Ball it's worth it because the thing you can find doesn't necessarily have to be a tutor. You could find, what is it, Regal Force or something, where it's like you
Yep.
ETB, draw a card for each green creature you control. So like you could just tutor that up. I
That's
think
true.
it's a tutor target, and then you
It
can,
is,
in
yep.
Elf Ball you have enough mana to just like, it doesn't matter. Oh, I spent 3 mana on my tutor spell. It's like, who cares? I have
Although
like
really,
infinite.
I feel like most of the time the problem is if you're at the point where you have enough green creatures for Regal Force to be good, a lot of times you're probably just gonna get hoof and kill people. If you have the mana and the board, like
You need to be, you need your land, yeah, but you still need your creatures untapped. Like sometimes
That's
you
true.
can't
Elf
can't
tap,
tutor
yeah,
up, yeah.
that's a good point.
So sometimes
other
you just want to refill or whatever, and then you wait to poof next time.
The other place I'll play it sometimes is Panharmonicon decks, like the Blinky Panharmonicon. If
Sure.
I'm double triggering this, because I'm a Yarok deck, let's say. I think this was my Yarok deck for a while. I'm not sure if I took it out or not, but it's very good in that shell. If this is a draw 2 or tutor 2 rather than just 1, it gets way better. Well, let's
I
move
mean,
on.
you know,
Oh, go ahead, Grim.
goblins are now like getting not like they're kind of growing outside of just mono red, right? You're seeing lots of other colors like green, red, Jun, but they usually have green and red. With the prominence of like phase out effects and you can't deal damage to me, I'm starting to wonder like if this card is worth it just to go grab the green red Gearhulk from Ether Drift.
Oh, God.
Because
Then you
then
have to put
shut
that in
it
your
off.
deck.
No, okay, hear me out. I
Firewood?
think that card may be better than you give it credit for in Commander to shut off all. This is definitely okay. This is skewed. I'll admit this. This
Richard's
is skewed
back.
to our meta. Okay, this is the Richard meta of fogging and all of that. But if damage can't be prevented, that's pretty big.
Oh yeah,
Right? Like, damage can't be prevented. I don't care about the Anthem effect. I mean, okay, the Anthem effect is nice, but you know what I mean? Like, the damage can't be prevented is huge, right? And it's not like you don't see, I've been got by darkness more than I'd like to admit, and not just by, like in here. I'm talking, like, out in the wild, right? You have more people are starting to pick up, like, maybe it's because people that I've played with have been supporters of our content, but they've been hitting me with, like,
right?
obscuring haze and things like that.
Yeah.
And, like, fogs are showing up all
Glacial
over
Chasm.
the place.
my Glacial Chasm is like, my decks have to be prepared for Glacial Chasm, or else my deck doesn't do anything. So I make sure every single of my deck is like, how do I have multiple outs to Glacial Chasm? So yeah,
Right.
I like that. I like that. If you need like another way to deal with a Glacial Chasm or whatever, then you could be like,
This might be the play, or maybe that's a mark on like Pyrewood Gearhulk,
Yeah.
because I think most people, and Vigilance and Menace, you know, very different from Haste and plus a million from Hoof, but you know what? Hoof doesn't play around fog, so I'm just saying maybe there's a world where
It's a lot of
Pyrewood
them.
Gearhulk might actually be good. It's stone unplayable in Standard, but
That's actually like
Commander,
that. If you're that concerned about beating the fogs, I can actually see it. Like
It's prominent
It just
now,
doesn't deal that much
right?
damage. Like, whenever I think about it, I'm like, I could
2+2?
play like a
Menace
Crater
and
Hoof or a
Vigilant.
Pain Bacon or whatever and just like actually kill you
All
if you
get
don't have
fogged.
the fog. But I worry, like, are you
All-
going to get enough damage to kill people? Like, yeah, you played around the fog, but if you only hit me for 6, I'm like, sure, like, I didn't even have to cast my fog because you played this thing and gave 2/2 instead of
I mean,
a real
the fierce
finisher.
Empath alone is 3, so you
It's
probably hit
yeah,
for
like
more
the
than
fierce
I think of
Empath.
it haste.
I don't know, Seth. I think, and it's in the prime color, like of anger and all of
That's
that. So
true.
you can
That's
build your
true.
own haste, yes, and it's a little bit more work. But shutting off all the fogs that are starting to appear in just Magic, like whether it's between this perch protection, I don't know, right? Stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you want to beat the fogs, keep the Gearhulk in mind. But let's move on to another tutor. This one I gotta ask Phil about because I feel like this is the Phil special in some ways. Maybe it's Woodland Bellower. Woodland Bellower. It's a 6-mana 6/5 beast. When it enters, you get to tutor for a very specific thing, a non-legendary green creature with mana value of 3 or less. But you get to put it directly onto the battlefield. So it is a little bit like Stoneforge in that way, I guess, where it's a tutor that actually gives you back some of that mana. If you get a 3-drop, you're kind of only spending 3 mana on this because you're getting 3 mana value out of what you tutor up. This is a card that I don't know if I've ever played. I assume if I played it, I was getting Eternal Witness with it, probably. But I'm very curious, Phil. You play a lot of green decks. What are you finding with this? Is there a specific target you're looking for?
So I have to admit, it's in Lonus as well, so I get
Oh.
extra bonus from it being a creature. It can be blinked.
This is just
I
Phil's
gotta
Lotus
admit, though,
decklist.
I wish it was. Yeah, it is kind I wish it was better. The non-legendary is so relevant. You can't
Yeah.
get Nissa, no Jaheira,
And it has to be green.
Yeah.
And it's restricted to
and
green.
it has to be green, which kind of like I like a little bit more niche tutors, so you feel you're clever about it. But usually it's like Rexage, Eternal
Rexage.
Witness,
Tireless Provisioner seems good.
Provisioner, then the I guess Zenra Steelseeker is a little niche for that deck. What's the other one? Wood Elves.
Oh, Wood
Also
Elves, get the
just
ramp on.
value. It is a lot of just value.
Oh.
I would. Yeah, the non-legendary is so weirdly relevant with this,
Yeah.
but it's still good. Also, you can find it with your Fear Empath or vice versa. So do with this whatever you want.
I wish I was in slower metas where I could do all this nonsense. But alas, that's like my problem is like it's so much mana, and then with the restrictions on top of it, it's like it's competing. If I really want a creature tutor, do I want this or like Worldly Tutor or Court of Calling or Greenstone Zenith or Finale of Devastation? It's like nah.
Yeah, in a vacuum,
I
you
never
gotta
run
build
this.
around it a bit. Like if you have a Panharmonicon and then this triggers twice, and then you get a Wood Elf that triggers twice,
Synergy
and
beats.
a Ewit that triggers twice. Like once you get synergies with it, it's better. I
Yeah.
wish it was better. I gotta admit, the restriction is more relevant than you'd think, and I don't fault. So on this list, Toma just said nah.
Nah.
Chris just said I don't play this.
Yeah.
I fault you for it.
It's like if I'm in Blink, if I'm in Panharmonicon, somehow a Panharmonicon green deck, and I have a lot of 4 targets for this, sure.
Even then, it's tough because if my Panharmonicon decks,
You
the
need a
problem
lot
is,
of targets.
my problem with this is if in my Panharmonicon decks, I don't have enough 3-mana non-legendary green creatures. So even though I could
Well, it could be
tutor,
less.
like I just don't have like enough, so it usually doesn't quite make the cut. I don't think it's a bad card. You just really need a specific plan with it, and there's not many decks that have the right synergy or plan. But if you are one of those decks, I mean, it's a 6/5 for 6. It comes along with a 3-drop. It can't be bad. Well, let's keep moving on. We got more cards to get through. We actually have a double trouble here. We have Ranger of Eos and Ranger Captain of Eos. These cards are very similar. Ranger Captain of Eos is a 3-drop 3/3. When it enters, you can search for a creature with mana value of 1 or less, put it in your hand, and then you can sack it to make your opponents not cast non-creature spells for a turn, kind of a weird silence effect. Ranger of Eos, the original, 4-mana 3/2. When it enters, you search for up to 2 1-drops and put them into your hand. So kind of like Brightglass Gearhulk. I'm actually curious, does Brightglass Gearhulk make this card like meaningfully worse? I feel like if you're in Selesnya, wouldn't you just play Brightglass over Ranger Captain of Eos most of the time these days?
Problem is,
Yeah.
Ranger Captain also has the second clause there, and it is a mana cheaper, right? Like You're talking about Ranger Captain, right? The one that
Ranger
gets
is-
the 1-drop.
We're talking about
right,
both,
it
but
gets
Ranger
that.
Either one,
Captain's
really.
different.
I guess Ranger
They are?
Captain's kind of different.
Ranger Captain still hits.
Ranger
but
Captain, you can
if you're talking about-
sacrifice, and opponents can cast non-creature spells this turn.
That's a nice
actually-
little
Yeah, that's
upside
relevant.
for some scenarios. Yeah,
That's like
they
the
can be
most.
good.
That's my most played creature tutor out of all of these on Commander class. Just because
really.
every time we're doing like the combo nonsense week, right? Like we have to do like first 1,000 life wins, first to whatever wins. We have to win with mill or whatever. These are combo weeks where we have to combo, and everybody else is trying to combo too. This is my best way of doing that because having a silence effect is so key to actually push your combo through. So I don't play these cards. I don't play Ranger Captain of VS almost ever in my paper decks because I'm not trying to force combos through. But for like gimmick weeks for Commander Clash, like having just an onboard silence is actually so good. So good. And I
Wait,
like
so
both
you
of
played
these.
without targets? Because
No,
you said
I
you're
still
not
play with
playing cards
targets.
without.
You got
Like,
an
I'll still have
Esper Sentinel or
Esper
something.
Sentinel, I'll still have,
I
like,
guess Esper
I'll still have like 3 targets for it no matter what. But this, I think these 2 in particular are also my favorites for any life gain deck. If I'm in a life gain deck,
Yep.
the 2 best cards in my deck are going to be Soul Word and Soul's Attendant, just because having that consistent life gain trigger that just happens forever is like the best thing ever for a life gain deck, where it's like whenever you gain a life, you gain 2 life. Whenever you do, you get +1/+1 counters, or you drain your opponents, or blah, 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 all those things. It's worth, being mana inefficient or something to just find both of them with like a Ranger Vios. Definitely worth it. And then you also have like Esper Sentinel or whatever. You can fill the slots with like 4 or 5 options.
Yeah, you also
very
get
easily.
Sarah Ascendant in your life gain deck. So if you need
Yes.
the big beater, like you get the life
Yeah.
gain or you get the big finisher. So it is like, I think these cards are at their best there, but there are plenty of like good targets, right? Like you can get the Esper Sentinels. Krim, what about you? Do you play these? You play these cards? I know you got a humans deck, right? Do you
It's
play them in your
humans,
humans
yeah.
deck?
They are
This
humans.
the 3 mana Ranger Captain I do play in humans. And yes, I do get Esper Sentinel there, but I think Esper Sentinel, I love that you all just assume every white deck has Esper Sentinel, but I think that card
yeah.
is so overrated. But yes, I do play Ranger Captain of Eos, mostly just because of the non-creature spells clause.
Mhm.
It's this card is one of the most skill intense, I would say a very good skill check and assessment threat, or like kind of answer check. You have to gauge who you're probably the most worried about. Like, I think I forgot which game it was, but I think sometime on Clash, it was either Seth or Tomer. They rightfully called me on having the board wipe. So they popped it, and then that was just like, oh,
Mhm.
man. Oh, God, I had it right there. But if you're going to have to, the miles may vary on this card because you really need to read who to pop this on.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But the fact of the matter is you get to go grab, like Seth had mentioned, Sarah Ascendant. There's a lot of good creatures. This is solid in humans. You have so many humans you can grab with this.
Also, a nice thing about Ranger Captain of Eos is the fact that it's a 3-drop means that you can sacrifice it and then immediately Sun Titan or Seven's Reclamation it back onto the battlefield. So 3 mana is actually very relevant, and that's a significant bonus compared to the Ranger of Eos, which is 4. If you are running Sun Titan and Seven's Reclamation, that means you could just recur it so easily.
What do you
It's
think?
also nice that this may seem weird, but in a minor kind of like plus side. But the fact of the matter that I can pop this without paying mana or doing anything means that in my humans deck, a lot of triggers are about to happen for free. Right? Like I just get to freely sack this.
Yep.
If you
What
do this
is-
against my Spellslinger deck, I skip a turn. Even
Yeah,
if I'm not
Titans,
trying
yeah.
to
Fizzle
win or
Storm
something,
combo or
I
something.
literally skipped a turn. Yeah.
What do you think about those?
I
Phil?
think so. Now that Toma mentioned this, I kind of want to build Trelasara life gain now because if you add green and have Brightglass Gearhulk, you get Essence one as well. So you have 3 sisters. You have the Attendant. You have Ocelot Pride. Like you have enough targets that are way more than worth more than 1 mana. Or you get it with the
Ocelot
Brightglass. You get Shadow Spear. So your Pride mates get super. Like isn't green white life gain? That's
You know,
you get all the
you know what we
I
gotta
think
do for
green is
one
just
of
build this
rubbing
now.
it in
Oh
at
my
that
God.
point. Like life gain's already good. You have to add green. Do you really?
Oh,
You know,
got it.
maybe
That's
we
not
gotta do
fun.
Good in Soul Sisters week, where we just all play Soul Sisters.
Soul Sisters.
I think
I
Morgan will
love that.
probably
Yeah.
murder all of us, but
We already did that with
Ironically-
1,000 Life. Didn't we all run Sarah's Ascendance and nonsense? I think we did.
I mean, yeah.
So let me ask you guys about these two cards. One more question before we move on. You play the 3-drop over the 4-drop, right? When it comes down to it, like if you're choosing, is Ranger Captain of Eos just essentially strictly better at this? And it's not strictly better, but is that the one that you play, given the choice between the two? That's the first one in the deck?
Yeah.
The Sun Titan thing is huge in white.
The loops.
I like
like
both, but you like especially the Ranger of Eos. Like I really want to have at least like 5 targets, and that's really tough outside of life gain. In life gain, that's +2 every single time. Outside of that, it's really hard for me sometimes to find that many targets without adding to the deck, and that's
Yeah.
a no for me.
And it's worth keeping in mind you're not getting them probably until turn 4, which makes like Mana Dorks a lot less appealing if you're a Mana Dork believer. Like, I'm going to tutor up a Birds of Paradise and play it on turn 5. Not exactly what your people want to be doing, but let's move on to
All of them you gotta add, because we didn't have any examples of this, and I can't really think of anything. I guess Chaos or something. You can get stuff that cost X and 1, which maybe that's
Yeah, Walking
something
Ballista.
Gold Vein
I guess
Hydra.
because it's less. You can get Walking Ballista, which is actually super relevant in life gain.
Ornithopter.
If you're a Heliod
I'd have to
deck, you
build
want a
life
Heliod
gain deck.
combo.
Oh my god.
You get a Soul Warden and an Ornithopter to trigger right away. It's a combo. Gain that life. Let's talk about a blue tutor. We haven't talked much about blue today. We have Spellseeker. 3-mana 1/1. When it enters, you get to tutor up a card that Krim probably has in his deck. Instant or sorcery with mana value 2 or less. What are you finding with Spellseeker? And you guys play Spellseeker?
First of all, before we do anything, we get an ephemerate with this, blink it, and then whatever you guys.
Yes, the
you
value.
gotta get that double
The
value.
value.
That's too much value. I don't even need that
You can't
much,
have
to
too
be
much
honest with you.
value.
I do love my Judge promo Spellseeker. And it is because you know what I'm grabbing. I'm grabbing either Mana Drain, but more often than not, I've found that because, like, with my newfound love for 3 steps ahead, this costs 1 mana, right? So
good call.
this gives me the draw to ditch 1. It gives me the ability to clone. It gives me, if I have to, use it as a counter spell, right? So I have found 3 steps ahead, which, by the way, can clone said Spellseeker if need be at instant speed to go grab whatever else if you want. But this card will usually grab like Rift and things like that, and we know those. Those are the good hits. But the new hits are 3 steps ahead. I really have been enjoying 3 steps ahead as a Magic card in Commander, and I think that that's probably close to a really high pick in casual tables.
So I have a problem with this card. And usually, like, the cards that we're saying that we've been mentioning are very good, like counter spells, Rift and stuff. But it seems very sus to me to be like, okay, sorcery speed 3-drop, take my Psych Rift, show Psych Rift to the table, and I hope if I have the mana to cast it, great. If I don't have the mana to cast it immediately, feels kind of bad. Because then everybody's going to be punching me in the face until
Wait,
I
how
cast
do
my
you-
Rift.
You're safe.
What is this segue? I see the card you want to talk about. Doesn't this mean is that?
Yes.
Wait,
like,
what are you?
I don't run this card. And also, like, mana drain
Okay.
too. It's like, okay, I've shown you the counter spell in my hand. It's like there is psychological warfare there, which can be useful in its own regard. I've known that has been very effective in the past in some games where you're like, please don't counter me, Mr. Krim. Or, I'll do anything you want, Mr. Krim, and then you'll be like, good. But like, I don't know. I feel like giving your opponents such knowledge ahead of time, especially like Rift or like I've showed Torment of Hellfire or whatever. These cards are very good, but like at the same time, if you're not able to cast them immediately because you just spent 3 mana to cast your Spellseeker, feels not great.
The information
Because
you give up
on
is
your
a
list
little
here,
awkward.
it said Torment of Hellfire.
I was
Which
just thinking
if you
about
say,
things
"Oh,
I
I
can
don't
grab.
Yeah, that's
Like-
a cool pick, by the way.
like
But if you
if-
say, "Oh no, I don't want to show it," to
Like
the
if
players,
I'm like the
yeah.
mere coffers, if I'm like the mere coffers and I make infinite mana, then who cares if I just spent 3 on my Spellseeker?
Yeah.
So that's why I put Torment of Hellfire. Like if you could just like Omega ramp and your finisher is Torments of Hailfire, then you could just run Spellseeker if you're in blue for some reason. But
For me,
generally speaking, I don't run this card.
Oh no, it's not just. Wait, is it just? It's instant or sorcery, right? I'm not.
Instant
So
or
you can
sorcery,
get
mana
open the
value
way.
2
Yeah.
or less,
Yeah.
Yes.
Instant or sorcery, it can get open the way. For me, I really play this, I think, in 2 spots, potentially. One is wizard decks. It works really well with, like, a Nala, since it likes to double your wizards. The other place is blink decks. Phil mentioned Ephemera right off the bat, but I think this is, like, amazing in blink decks because almost all of your spell blink is going to be 1 or 2 mana. Like, those are the most common ones. I guess the mass blink is a little more expensive, but any targeted blink probably going to be 1 or 2 mana. And this just works really well with a deck that's resetting it all the time. You can use the ephemerate effects as kind of protection for your creatures. So I think in those shells, it's really good. I don't really play in control decks, though. Like, in a control deck, I think I'd rather just play, like, the next best counter or whatever than play a Spellseeker and pay a 3-mana tax on my counter. But I think I'd rather just add, like, Arcane Denial or something than try to tutor up a counter spell most of the
When
time.
Krim is running like
Fair.
12 counters, though, then
Yeah,
I'll
you
probably
need to
draw
start
one,
tutoring them up, you know? Like,
You can also get doppelgang with this.
Oh, see,
Which
those big X
others-
spells,
Yeah,
that's
if you-
actually kind of appealing.
have
the
the
Torment of
mana.
Hailfire, the Doppelgang.
if you have the infinite mana, then it's worth, I guess.
This thing needs flash. If it had flash,
mean,
this
you
card
play
is
simple.
busted.
If it had flash, that would be way too strong. Are
card
you
would be
kidding me?
so-
Give it a year. Give it a year.
We're
Seth.
almost
Give it a
there,
year.
yeah.
We got Micromancer
A little
as well,
ETB
which
draw
is,
card.
costs more and is more
Micromancer-
restrictive, but super cheap
Yeah.
if you wanna go
Micromancer works
much.
well with Ephemera in specific. It just tutors
Yeah.
up a
And
instant
3
sorcery
steps
mana
ahead as
value
well.
1. Yeah, I guess 3 steps ahead as well. But yeah, it's even more narrow. Well, let's move on and we'll talk about these two together, I think. The 2 guards, Recruiter the Guard and Imperial Recruiter. So Recruiter the Guard, it's a 3 mana 1/1 that when it enters, you get to tutor up a creature with toughness 2 or less. And then Imperial Recruiter, same thing, but it's in red rather than white. But you get to get a creature with power 2 or less. So these cards, kind of flexible, like power 2 or less, toughness 2 or less. There's a lot of creatures that meet that criteria. They're both humans as well, if that's relevant to some of your decks. What do you guys think about these cards?
I mean, these are the
I
ones
played
that you
both
can.
of these.
Yeah, these are also the ones that you can just you play them for value. These you really have enough targets, right? If you
Kiki
play
combo.
white,
Oh, you're always going to have,
Yeah.
Kiki combo.
you're always going to have something. You get your catch-up ramp, you can get Kiki. There's so many things that you can hit with this. Where I think if you're like a richer deck that just plays a lot of small creatures, you can just kind of run these for value, right? You don't need a super specific plan, just like I'm going to find something with it.
I mean, sure. You could
I
find it, like, I don't know if I would like. You could if you really want to try to do that, but like I think there's got to be strong synergies.
Yeah, like
I think
a blink or whatever, or your aristocrats or something in the body is good. I feel like, again, it's the same issue of like the Trinket Mages and whatnot. I think these are better because they're more open-ended. I used to run both of these for a long time in my equipment deck because the best card in the deck by such a large margin was Pure Steel Paladin. And like, if I didn't have Pure Steel Paladin, my deck was just not functioning properly because equip costs are very expensive. And I was lacking in card draw and all that good stuff. Over time, though, there's just been more redundancy. Like we got like Sigarda's Age is a while back now, but we got Hammer and on afterwards. We got a bunch of like classes, like fighter class and stuff that kind of add redundancies to the deck. So I took it out. And because I kind of felt like also finding Pure Steel Paladin every single game was kind of boring. Even if it's the best version of it. But like, yeah. I guess if you're like Blink again, you're good. It's cool.
Or personally, you know why I love my Mardu Humans deck.
Yeah.
And these two are right at home. Whether they go and grab me like one example, which one is the one on power 1 or less? Because that one
Imperial.
I go
Recruit.
grab.
Yeah, power 2 or less, but yeah, Imperial
Power
Recruiter.
2 or less. Imperial Recruiter, that's the one that I go grab, like Adeline. I go get the new Alessia, General's Enforcer to give all of my humans, legendary ones, indestructible. Droneth Magistrate, right? Like Fiend Hunter, things like that. But then the inverse, the other one that goes for toughness, that's the one where I get to go grab, like, with Recruiter of the Guard, right? So I get to grab, like, Thalia, Heretic Cathar, Delny. I guess Delny works on either. But Jarina Dauntless General, which gives my humans, like, an onboard way to get Hexproof, Indestructible, Graveyard Hate. Oppo Agent, my personal
Game
favorite.
changer.
Game changer.
Thalia's
Too
Lieutenant.
powerful.
Both of these also grab one of the sweetest new humans that are flexible in Lauren of the Third Path.
But your deck's
So-
also aristocrats too, right? So you use the body afterwards.
I love the body. So
I think
the
that's
body is just perfect for it, and it kind of chains into the next piece to assemble the human's game plan, right? Where there's just so many of them that when you try to do anything, 50 things trigger.
Yeah, I like it there.
Well, let's move on. We got one more card, and then we're going to do just kind of a one free-for-all round. We're going to just talk about anything we haven't talked about to wrap things up today. But we haven't really talked about a red artifact tutor, and there's a few different ones, but probably the biggest one, Goblin Engineer. So Goblin Engineer, it's a red 2-drop. It's a goblin, as its name suggests, also an artificer. When it enters, you can search your library for an artifact card, put it in your graveyard, and then you can pay red mana, tap and sack an artifact to return an artifact card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to your battlefield. So kind of like a Goblin Welder, except it has a worse reanimation mode, but you get the upside that it can be a tutor as well. I'm curious if you guys play this one. I feel like it's very, very strong, but I mostly play it as like a weird entomb, right? Like I don't play it too much usually for its like reanimation ability. It's more like get my big artifact in the graveyard and then I'm going to reanimate it with something else or have some other synergy for it. But what do you guys do with this one?
In my Iron Man deck, this is just the guy to go. Again, you had mentioned Entomb. Bring something back. Or in this case, in Iron Man, it's nice because when you sack so many of your cheap artifacts, you want to be able to like bring your stuff back and then go back up the pod chain again for artifacts. So Goblin Engineer being able to do that is phenomenal. Although it's not like Welder, which has the funny Instagram secret layer. So I you know what I mean? Like I really like Goblin Engineer though because of what you had mentioned in specifically Iron Man, because it throwing away an artifact. It allowed me to get it back because let's not lie here. Tomer knows this because he has like a million artifacts. Phil plays what is pretty much an artifact deck. There's no shortage of recursion for artifacts. So
Yeah, it plays so well with other recursion.
Yeah.
Like you could set up your Goblin Welder. You could like if you have mass reanimation, like Wake the Past or whatever, you could just put like your Portal to Phyrexia into the graveyard because the tutor restriction. There's no tutor restriction on it. It's just whatever you reanimate. But for me, it's got to be the Mech Titan. I always get Mech Titan for.
Tomer's just always trying to assemble some form of Cauldron. In one way or another, Cauldron will be assembled. Phil, do you play this in your Mishra deck? Because when I think of this card, I think of like Osgir, Doretti, these like graveyardy artifact commanders. And Mishra's kind of on that list. So is this a Mishra card for you?
So if I had the old Border Foil one, I would. Oh, that's a nice Mech Titan.
That is a nice Mech Titan.
I currently don't play it. I don't play the whole Goblin Engineer package, like with the Welder as well. They're not artifacts, which is my rationing for it, but they would be sick. They also work super well with, like, you always need something to throw away with it, which Mishra makes, but it could be a treasure or something. If you get Brass's Tunnel Grinder with this, that is probably the thing that works best with this whole game plan, because then you sack something next turn. Like, you can get this back with its ability, then you automatically descend it, even if you don't discard a land or like a permanent. And then next turn you do it again, maybe because you discard an artifact. Like, I think Brass's Tunnel Grinder fits best with this in a vacuum. I wish I found room for this in Mishra, but I got a stack of cards for Mishra that I haven't found room yet. Iron Man isn't even in there yet. What do I do? So many cards that work with this.
Artifact decks have too many options.
Embarrassment of
riches. Found room for it.
Embarrassment.
I would get the Tunnel Grinder, which is such a good card.
Yeah. I mean, Goblin Engineer, it's really I like it in the graveyard artifact decks. I play it in like Osgir, Doretti style decks. I don't really, like I said before, I don't really plan on using its ability too much. Sometimes it comes up where it's relevant, but mostly it's like, I want to put this big artifact in my deck so Osgir can, put it into play, or Doretti can reanimate it. I think in those shells, it can be very powerful. And also, like, swords are 3 or less mana. A lot of the equipment we've been talking about is cheap. So in the right deck, you can get some value looping stuff from your graveyard too.
Toma, check this out. You get one of the artifact lands, sacrifice an artifact to get it back, and then you can do
And then
the
Cleansing
blow it up to
Wildfire.
Oh yeah,
It
no,
makes
I
this
do that. I
Oh
do that.
my
something.
God.
You need to fauna
It's even
shaman
better
to
in
start a
Petson.
creature to get Goblin
You got
Engineer to get the
3
artifact.
indestructible lands. Oh
This
my
is
God, that's
big.
so
This
good.
is ramp.
Green Sun Zenith into the fauna
We broke
shaman.
it.
We
I
get it.
outramp the green player with my cleansing wildfire attack. Also,
So-
Mech Titan. This is why you run Mech Titan for the sweet weeb,
the-
the weeb proxy tokens.
Very
Yeah,
nice.
very
Ava Unit
nice.
1, right? Yeah, that is.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
All right, so those are roughly the top 10 tutors, creature tutors that we talked about. Should also say, we didn't talk about any land tutors because there's so many of those. We might actually do a whole nother episode at some point where we
Okay,
talk
whole
about
podcast.
creatures that tutor up lands because there's a lot of them. But I want to give y'all, there's still a bunch more creatures that tutor. I want to give y'all one chance on the way out the door today to give us a sleeper or a card that we didn't talk about today that you just personally like. So what's a creature that tutors that you like, and what do you tutor up with it? And let's start with Krim. Krim, give us something we haven't talked about yet.
Okay, so I think one of my favorites is just because from a special time and set, it's Lorwyn Fairy Harbinger, right? It kind of does
yeah.
what you talked about a little bit with like the you wish Spellseeker did, but it does have flash. It's a 4-mana
Has flash?
flying 2/2 with flash. When it comes into play, you may search your library for a fairy card. Put it, shuffle your library and put that card on top. So you put the fairy that you need back on top, and usually whatever fairy that is, I'm not gonna lie to you, it's usually like Scion of Una or something like that, or sometimes Spell Stutter Sprite, right? Mistbind Click if I really want to be annoying on someone's upkeep, right? So this is a card that just art-wise stuck with me. It's one of my favorites from my favorite creature type. So really love Fairy Harbinger.
Yeah, there's
I
actually
love that we have the favorite creature type together.
Yeah, see, we aligned, Homer.
and there's a whole cycle of those. So even if you're not a fairy fan, there's a bunch of different harbingers. So so keep an eye out for those. If you're in the right playing with the right creature type, they can be worth it. Tomer, give us a card that tutors that we haven't talked about and why you like it, and what you do with it.
Okay. So I don't do it often, but sometimes I'm feeling a little bit mean. And I've played 5-color Super Friends a couple times. I took it apart because my favorite thing to do would be Academy Rector. Academy Rector, 4-man, or sorry, yeah, Arena Rector. No, sorry, Arena Rector, 4-mana
Yeah.
white. I think it's like a 2/2 body or something. It doesn't matter. Because when it dies, you get to search your library for a planeswalker and put it immediately onto the battlefield. So what I
Busted.
like to do is I like to have that sweet, sweet Arena Rector just sitting on the battlefield. And I'm not waiting for it to die. I'm going to proactively kill it with Jokel Hops. Jokel Hops blows up all the
Get the
permanents
chance.
except for a chip, basically.
Planeswalker.
Planeswalker. It just like destroys all artifacts, lands, and creatures. And then, the Rector dies. So guess what? Nicol Bolas God Pharaoh just to salt the wounds a little bit, just salting them.
Brutal.
Just to salt them. You have
And I'm
nothing.
playing everyone's cards.
Yeah, you have nothing on the battlefield, and then Nicol Bolas is just sitting there eating up all your library, playing all your cards. Usually
You
people
know-
concede after that, but I mean it's worth it. It's worth it. And then
If
you
people
die
decide
the
to
next game.
play
But,
the
like,
game after that, you should just play Nicol Bolas Planeswalkers. Then you can uptick, just blow up whatever lands they would play.
when I would pull this off, I would die. I would be hated out the next games. Like the rest of the night, I would
makes
just
sense.
be hated out.
Oh, for sure.
And it would be, I would just die laughing. Oh, it was good times.
Both Rectors have a kind of a soft spot for me. I play them in my Super Friends deck, right? My Amanatu one. So I get it, Telmer. I get it. I mean, I don't Jockle Hop, so apparently
Cataclysm.
Yeah,
Cataclysm.
you are.
Huh?
What do you play Academy
Christ.
Rector for in Super Friends? What's your Academy
Oh.
Rector does the same thing, but for enchantments. What's the enchantment you look for?
I mean, so Esper, right? So I get to
Oh,
play Spreading Plague, which
Oh,
keeps like creatures off the board.
Yeah. Humility.
Man, I'd rather get got by
Humilities.
Tomers. Yeah, MLB.
See, at least I don't blow up your lands, though.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you gotta remember, I don't blow up your lands. I'm just here to blow up your
That's a
creatures.
taboo. That's a
Yeah.
line.
Yeah, that's across the line. That's across the line.
Also, humility kind of too mean, so I just go with Overwhelming Splendor. So it's
that's-
only
that's
one
only
person
one
gets
person
humiliated.
gets wrecked.
Yeah, that's much more tolerable, and it
Yes.
sends a better message. Like,
Yeah.
no, I don't want to hurt these two. I want to hurt you, right? So
You
I
can
almost
so
think they're too good.
You can do some good politics with them, though. Whenever we've
Yeah.
seen them, it's like, if you attack me, I'm going to block with this. I'm going to get my overwhelming splendor. I'm going to target you. And that's usually enough to deter anything else. So
I
these are
think
pretty
something
interesting.
that's also nice about it is like also you could politic to where this gets you a planeswalker you need, and one that's really good that'll save you more often than not is like Teferi, Master of Time. I still think this is a very good planeswalker in Commander because you can activate his ability once on each turn at
Yeah.
instant speed.
Yeah.
Well,
love
Phil.
Teferi.
Why don't you give us a creature, one we haven't talked about that tutors?
Yeah, so there's one on this list, which I admittedly don't play much on Clash. I do play it in Arena, though, in Brawl, which is getting closer and closer to actual Commander. It's missing some staples, but whatever. So in Blink decks, a card that is better than you might think is Thalia's Lancers. It is 5 mana, 4/4, first strike. When it enters, you search your library for a legendary permanent. Which the reason why Woodland Bellower kinda sucks is because the coolest cards are legendary. So this one gets, like, let's say we stay in Blink, we get Lauren, we get Alish Norn, we get the Azorius thing that whenever you cast your second spell, you blink something. I don't know what it is. The thing that it most likely gets, though, is Nykthos. Or like
Okay,
Otawara,
okay.
because all
That's
tutors
actually-
that have the upside of finding a land are usually just good. So a 4/4 first strike that found you your land drop, so you stayed in the game. And if your land drop is like Nykthos or
Yeah, it's
Tavara,
like
that
finding a
means
bunch of
it's
land
also
drops.
interaction. This one plays super well, maybe because nowadays there's so many good legends. It finds Fibberthip if you're playing.
I
So
do have a little bit
this
that.
one plays fine. I haven't played it on Clash yet, admittedly, but I do play it I play a Yorion deck in Brawl sometimes, and I mean it's pretty good. If you blink it,
I've
get
played
some
it
value.
in White Devotion decks
play
and
it-
other formats, so I imagine it's probably
Oh, yeah.
pretty good, like getting Nykthos, because it's just like an inherently powerful effect. So yeah, I think if you're getting the legendary lands, I kind of like it. Tutoring a
You're
blood
just showing off my Amanatu play deck list here, Phil. Because
Oh, yeah,
all my
all legend-
planeswalkers,
Planeswalkers,
you
yeah.
blink with Amanatu, you just do this over and over and over. But keep in mind, by the way, my Amanatu is definitely a 4. It's not. That's my most miserable deck to play against. So, but I love that deck. So, and this card is also in there.
Well,
5 mana is a little bit much for me, but in Blink, I can see it definitely being worth it, especially if you're like repeatedly getting your Nykthos and Otawaras and stuff like that. That starts being very
And
tasty.
planeswalkers. Did you also know this can get you the People's Champ, by the way, Tomer? Do you know what the People's Champ is? It's
Who's
the
the
Meat Hook
rock?
Massacre, baby.
Oh right.
You
Why
can
is
get
it?
that.
Why is
That's
why is that
legendary.
the people's
Yeah.
champ?
Who doesn't
Yeah,
love the Meat
that's-
Hook Massacre? It's the best, like,
I thought this
It's
was a
so
rock
good.
reference.
no. Oh, it could be played in Rock, but dude, Meat Hook Champ, Meat Hook is so nice. It's such a good card. So it's nice that it can grab it.
All right,
But
so
then people punch you in the face.
yeah, that-
Yeah.
but you gain life, so it's okay. You can
Yeah,
take
you
a
gain
But
few
you
Punches
paid
to
punches
the
5 mana.
face.
You're gonna meat hook that turn? No, I get a full round of punching you in the face.
Oh.
It has
okay,
first
pay me
strike.
for
It's
2.
not too easy to punch through.
Yeah.
it, honestly.
Yeah,
It's
first
a
strike.
body, Tomer.
It's basically a Brightglass Gearhulk to bring us full
Yeah.
circle to
Yeah.
where we started. It's got the same body. Well, I gotta give a shout out to a card. I don't want to know if I would say this is my favorite creature tutor we haven't talked about, but it is one I've played in quite a few decks, and I think it's worth bringing up, which is Heliod's Pilgrim. So Heliod's Pilgrim, 3 mana 1/2. When it enters, you get to search your library for an aura card reveal, put it in your hand and shuffle. So it's kind of like the trophy mage style effect. And the reason I think this one is good, even though Tomer's criticism about like 3 mana sorcery speed tutors, I definitely agree with, but because it's specifically getting an aura, you know you need to have bodies on the battlefield because you got to have a body to put your aura on. So I think that is kind of an acceptable 3 mana sorcery speed tutor. That if I'm playing like a bestow deck or a deck that has like synergies around auras, this is a really easy inclusion because it adds a body to the battlefield and it's going to get my best aura for whatever situation I'm in. So not a flashy card, but I think actually a really good card for aura decks.
No, this
Is
one
there
I'm actually
anything-
100% on board with. Because like I
Okay,
used to
keep
play
playing
auras
auras.
for like I felt like when mono white was bad, which was a long time ago.
You and your
mono
Sage's Revelry or whatever to try to draw
yeah,
cards.
mono white auras was how I did it. Like as soon as they printed SRAM, which was like
Oh yeah.
I want to say it was a couple years ago.
Oh,
Kaladesh
boy.
was a couple
Couple
years
decades
ago,
ago,
right, guys?
maybe.
Couple right, guys? Yeah. Then I was like, this is it. This week it tutors up your Sage's Reverie. You refill your hand. You play Mantle of the Ancients. You restock everything from all the auras. Go from the graveyard directly back onto the battlefield. Game on. You know, like so. Yeah, it's worth. It's worth.
It's good.
Is there something that you don't think about, like how Fierce Empath can grab an MDFC land or something? Is there like an aura that's a land or a creature?
Strength of
or
the
something?
Harvest and Glasswing Grace. Just 2.
So there are aura
What?
MDFCs. The color's not
Oh,
mono
right, yeah.
white, right?
You have to be white, black,
Yeah.
or white, green. They're
Yeah,
both-
so if you're in Selesnya or Orzhov, you can grab MDFC lands. Yeah.
Hmm.
Anyway, those are our creature tutors. Those are what we tutor up with them. Hopefully you enjoyed this podcast, and make sure to let us know in the comments what creature tutors you play, or the cards we talked about today. Is there something we missed as far as what you tutor up with them? Is there some great target float out there? Let us know about that in the comments too. And we'll be back next week to talk about more commanders. So until then, have a great week, everyone. And this is the crew signing out.